Hello, and welcome to Fred Asquith on Film, at Fred Asquith on Film, TikTok and Instagram, also known as Fred on Film, also known as FoF, colloquially between me and you, the FoF community. If you're new to the FoF community, welcome. You have joined at a great time. If you just joined the FoF community, what fucking timing you've got? Because I have just got back from Paris, where I've been interviewing James Cameron. Anyone who follows at Fred Asquith on Film on the socials will see that I just put that out earlier this week. It's 100% the biggest thing to ever happen to this podcast and also me. Does that make sense? This podcast has been going for, I think it's 40 episodes now, so roughly around there. I've got to interview James Cameron within a year of starting this podcast. Incredible. I've got to interview James Cameron within 32 years of being on this earth, right? That's just that both are significant, and I'm not going to talk about it now because I want to give it the space, and I also can't review Avatar: Fire and Ash until the embargo lifts on Tuesday, the 16th of December at 2 p.m. So I'm going to try my very, very hardest to have a special Avatar: Fire and Ash episode out at 2 p.m. on the 16th. Literally, as the embargo drops, we're going to be there front and center with the review. And given that I've seen the film, I saw the film in advance of leaving for Paris, and I got invited by Disney, so they showed me the film in London before we left, so that I knew what to talk to James Cameron about, and I wasn't just like, so cameras, but then obviously went to the premiere, so I've actually seen the film twice. If you can't wait for that review, or if you can't wait for that junket, by the time you'll listen to this, I will have put the full interview up on YouTube, and I will have started to release clips on the socials at Fred Asquith on Film. So go check those out. And you might be thinking, oh, well, Fred, we listen to your podcast. Why aren't we getting all this stuff first? I completely get what you're saying. The embargo is the problem. Like, I want to dedicate a full episode to Avatar, just like I did Wicked and just like I did One Battle After Another, these big movies that are coming out. And so I'm waiting for the embargo, basically. But what the podcast listeners, what you are going to get is a full rundown that no one else is going to get, is a full rundown of the experience of what it's like to interview anyone in a junket, and especially someone of that stature. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of like the environment and like checking in and the nerves and the waiting rooms and all this. I'm going to walk you through that in the next episode. So you are getting exclusive information on the James Cameron situation. Can we just take a second to say, how fucking amazing is this? Like I said, 40 episodes in, we're interviewing James Cameron. Like, even blue sky thinking, pardon the Avatar pun, but blue sky thinking at the start of this pod, you know, I was like, I hope I get a junket. I just didn't realize the first one was going to be with James fucking Cameron. Anyway, I'm talking too much already. We're going to go into all that in depth next week. I will give you the rundown. I will play the interview. I will then review Avatar 3, which, as I have mentioned, I have seen twice. However, I have booked tickets to see it a third time. Now, that isn't a spoiler on my opinion on the film, because I'll tell you why I've booked to see it a third time. Because now we're moving on to the rest of the episode, and the first bit of news is that it's rumoured that 2 trailers are going to be attached to the Avatar 3 release. The first one is a Spielberg UFO movie that I don't think anyone really realised how far along he was with this movie. And the second is a trailer for Avengers Doomsday. Both movies are looking like they're going to be released next year. Who knows if those dates get moved. But those are 2 very exciting trailers. And off the back of the Odyssey trailer, Nolan's Odyssey trailer, being attached to Jurassic World Rebirth, and it still isn't online. So it was only available in that cinema run if you bought a ticket to Jurassic World Rebirth. And apologies to everyone else who, like me, had to go through the Jurassic World Rebirth experience just to see the Odyssey trailer. Okay, that's not quite true. Obviously, I wanted to see the film as well, but it was fucking trash. Anyway, so I'm going to go see Avatar 3 and to watch these trailers again. And, you know, I might stick around and watch the film. So for the rest of the episode, we've got 3 things to cover. I'm going to talk about what Quentin Tarantino said about Paul Dano or Dano. Let's go Dano. What Quentin Tarantino said about Paul Dano in There'll Be Blood. We're also going to discuss the Netflix, the prospected Netflix purchase of Warner Brothers HBO. Okay, that is a huge piece of news in the industry, and we're gonna deep dive into like what it means for us. Like, I'm not an economist, I'm not a business like guy, but we can deep dive into what it means for us, for film fans. And then, speaking of Netflix, we're going to finish off with a review of Knives Out 3, which is Wake Up Dead Man, which is coming to Netflix this Friday, I believe. Yeah, it's coming to Netflix this week. So, first things first, I want to talk about what Quentin Tarantino said about Paul Dano. I have actually let me start that sentence again. This year, there haven't been many conversations in the sort of film discourse that have got more oxygen than this. Like, when I go onto Threads, which I consider like my platform for film discourse nowadays. Obviously, it used to be Twitter and sometimes it's Instagram, but generally Threads is really good at getting that kind of film community conversation in your feed. And there was just so much about this story, what Quentin Tarantino said about Paul Dano. So let me just clarify what this is. This was Quentin Tarantino, I believe, on his own podcast, or a podcast that he frequents, talking about his top movies of the 21st century, right? And he ranked There'll Be Blood, which happens to be my joint favourite movie. That's the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, starring Paul Dano, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. If you don't know what There'll Be Blood is, you should definitely Google it and go watch it, right? And he put There'll Be Blood at roughly, it was number 9 or 10 or something like that. And I've heard him wax lyrical about There'll Be Blood in the past. And I know how much Quentin Tarantino's good friends with Paul Thomas Anderson. I know how complimentary he's been about it. And so him putting it at 9 or 10 was significant. And he goes on to explain why. He says, he basically said, I put it down there. He said it could be number 1 if it wasn't for the fact that Paul Dano's performance, who is sort of like the opposing, is sort of the antagonist to Daniel Plainview's anti-hero in the movie, right? And he said, if that performance wasn't so weak, it could be the best film of the 21st century. Let me tell you exactly what he said. He says, it's supposed to be a two-hander, but Daniel Day-Lewis also makes it impossible to make it a two-hander because there are aspects of that performance that are so gargantuan. And then he says, so you put him with the weakest male actor in SAG. SAG being, this is me talking now, SAG being the Screen Actors Guild, right? Which is the guild that you have to be a part of if you perform in Hollywood movies. So he's saying Paul Dano, fucking hell, is the weakest actor in Hollywood and doesn't have the juice to match up to Daniel Plainview in that movie, which is supposed to be a two-hander. That's what his point is. Setting aside the fact that Tarantino himself acts in his own movies and therefore is a member of SAG, and therefore he is the worst actor in SAG because his performances in his own movies are fucking diabolical. Setting that aside, he went on to say this: I don't care for him, this being Paul Dano. I don't care for him, I don't care for Owen Wilson, and I don't care for Matthew Lillard. This was my funniest part of the whole quote, because he's kind of making a point about There'll Be Blood specifically, and then just goes on to throw strays at Owen Wilson and Matthew Lillard. We all know who Owen Wilson is. The guy who's starred in a million Ben Stiller comedy movies and some other stuff, Midnight in Paris and blah, blah, blah. And Matthew Lillard, I had to Google, but Matthew Lillard is the comedy actor who's in Scream and Scooby-Doo and shit like that, right? So I'm like, what? Matthew Lillard just sat minding his own business, catching a stray from Quentin Tarantino on a podcast talking about a film that he wasn't even in. He's like, what the fuck? What did I do? Why did I get picked on? Does anyone remember that meme? Oh, the guy in the car. Why did I get picked on? So he said, and he goes on to say, I'm not saying Dano is given a terrible performance. I'm saying he's given a non-entity performance. Okay. Just to be clear, he's saying that There'll Be Blood should be a two-hander and Paul Dano does not have it what it takes to match Daniel Day-Lewis. Now, here's my response to this. There'll Be Blood entirely works, and it is entirely down to the fact that the performances of Daniel Plainview, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Paul Dano, who plays Eli, are, in my opinion, perfect. Yes, it is a two-hander, but the dynamic of that two-hander is perfectly poised. And that is completely deliberate by Paul Thomas Anderson to make Eli, played by Paul Dano, a sort of like snivelly, a sort of beta character. And I don't use the term beta lightly. I hate the whole like Joe Rogan-y alpha beta culture, right? I hate it. But that is what that film is. It's like Daniel Day-Lewis is an alpha force, and Eli is supposed to be like a shrinking beta force that is just sort of like a maggot, like pinching at Daniel Day-Lewis's ear. It's just supposed to be like Daniel Plainview is drilling and plowing and upturning this whole land in order to get the oil he needs to make his riches. And Eli owns a church on that land. He is nothing to Daniel Plainview, and yet Daniel Plainview needs him in order to get what he wants. So Eli's not supposed to be, quote unquote, as Quentin Tarantino says, a gargantuan figure like Daniel Plainview. Eli's supposed to be a fucking nuisance. He's supposed to be a snivelly, shrinking little bug, just like, oh, fuck off, just like annoying. He's supposed to be annoying to Daniel Plainview. And that's what Paul Dano performs perfectly. There's a scene there's scenes in There'll Be Blood. I was going to say there's a scene. There are scenes in There'll Be Blood that are some of the best scenes ever committed to celluloid, in my opinion. And that is partly and sometimes wholly down to Paul Dano's performance. So the first time I think it might be the first time we meet Paul. No, it's not the first time we meet him, sorry. But the first time we're in Eli's church and the camera tracks in from Daniel Plainview coming to sort of peek in from outside the door, tracks in to Eli performing a sermon, like an evangelical sermon, and then tracks out with him as he stalks down the church aisle and is screaming at the top of his lungs, and as long as I have teeth, I will smite. I don't even know what he fucking says, right? The performance in that scene is out of this fucking world, right? Whether or not you think it's a perfect performance, the fact that Quentin Tarantino can say that he's the weakest actor in SAG and it's a terrible performance and it drags the film down is just crazy. I'll at least accept that you think it could be better, maybe, that it's like a 7 out of 10. I disagree. I think it's 10 out of 10. But to say he's essentially saying there's a 0 out of 10 as an actor and as a performance is just sacrilege to me. It's like it's not on. And then secondly, to just kind of throw out there that Paul Dano, fucking hell, am I going to get that the same? I was going to say right, even just the same. Paul Dano saying he's the weakest actor in SAG, full stop, is just obviously wrong. He's obviously look, Quentin Tarantino's obviously just like talking casually on a podcast. If you actually drilled into it, maybe he didn't quite mean it literally or whatever, but it's a thing to say, isn't it? It's a thing to say when you're Quentin Tarantino. You know, you're gonna be listened to. So let's just go through this. Paul Dano played Dwayne in Little Miss Sunshine, maybe the most memorable part of that movie, and that's a movie with Steve Carell and Toni Collette and Alan Arkin in it. Like, that is a wonderful movie, and he's almost like the heart of it, and he barely says a word. Then he did There'll Be Blood in 2007. Then he has a small, awful, menacing role in 12 Years a Slave. I mean, awful in terms of the character is awful, the performance is brilliant. But in 12 Years a Slave, yeah, it's a brilliant performance. Then he plays Alex Jones in Prisoners, who is the guy who Hugh Jackman locks up in a bathtub and I don't even want to say the word because I might get blocked, but does things to him in order to find out where his kids have been kidnapped. I mean, what a performance that is! Like, it again, saying very little but transfixing as a performance. Love and Mercy, he plays Brian Wilson, the lead singer of the Beach Boys. a brilliant biopic and a brilliant performance. The Batman, he plays the Riddler, almost steals the movie. And this is such a range. So he clearly has the ability to play like an absolute wacko in the Batman and in Prisoners. But then he also has the ability to play someone extremely reserved in Little Miss Sunshine, for example. And he also has the ability to play someone who's just like pure evil. So 12 Years a Slave. And There'll Be Blood is not even any of them. Like, it's a completely different thing. So basically, Quentin Tarantino, you're chatting shit. You're the weakest actor in SAG. And also, realize that you're Quentin Tarantino, okay? Whatever I say on this podcast, for example, barely makes an imprint in the world of film discourse. You know, I might say I don't quite like Wicked Part 2 and you get some comments and things like that, but I'm not Quentin Tarantino, right? I don't have to really think about what comes out of my mouth because it doesn't fucking matter, okay? This is a closed space between me and you, and that's what I like about it. Quentin Tarantino, if I was Quentin Tarantino, I'd probably think twice about what I was putting out there, and I'd probably try and be supportive of my fellow fucking artists and not just throw shade all over the place. I mean, it's just not a way to do business. I mean, who am I to tell that to Quentin Tarantino? But it felt really sour and it felt really wrong of him to do that. Which leads us on to the biggest news story. We're talking about film discourse, right? This is the biggest news story, potentially of the year, in the business of film and TV. This is the news that Warner Brothers has been up for sale, and they've been up for and the potential buyers have been Comcast, Paramount, and Netflix, okay? Netflix have essentially secured the deal. Now, let's be clear. It's the headline is Netflix are to acquire Warner Brothers in a deal valued at $82.7 billion, which is a lot of money, right? But let's be clear about this. The deal's not done. This deal is going to be wrapped up in the courts for 1 to 2 years, basically deducing whether this is a issue in terms of the monopolization of the market. Is Netflix buying Warner Brothers a threat to the market in terms of Netflix owning too much IP, okay? And too much sort of audience influence. But it's, for all intents and purposes, happening because Netflix sent out a press release. They sent out an email, which if you're a subscriber to Netflix, you will have got this email. Every subscriber got this email. So I got this email too. It said, "Hi Fred, we've recently announced Netflix will acquire Warner Brothers, including HBO Max and HBO. This unites our leading entertainment service with Warner Brothers' iconic stories, bringing some of the world's most beloved franchises like Harry Potter, which is being made on HBO, Friends, The Big Bang Theory, Casablanca, Game of Thrones, and the DC Universe," right? Which Warner Brothers release. Can I just cut in on on an element there? It says bringing together some of the most beloved franchises like Casablanca. Sorry, since when was Casablanca a franchise? You mean the classic movie that's never had a fucking sequel or a remake? What is that about? Anyway, Warner Brothers are a creatively rich company that have released some of the best movies of this year and the last, 50, 60 years. So just talking about this year, Warner Brothers released Sinners, Weapons, One Battle After Another. I think those are the three best examples because they are three of the best movies of 2025. Original stories for all three and all successful at the box office in theaters, right? They've also released Mickey 17, Minecraft, which is an unbelievable success, albeit it is IP. Final Destination Bloodlines, which was, again, a massive success. F1, which was a collaboration with Apple TV. This is Netflix buying Warner Brothers. This is like McDonald's buying the Louvre, right? The weirdest meeting of cultures in the Hollywood business that you could ever really imagine. Why are they doing this? Okay, so as you can see by the IP that they've listed that Warner Brothers own, Netflix, by buying Warner Brothers, will buy the IP. So they'll be able to do what they want with Harry Potter, Friends, the DC Universe, blah, blah, blah. That's an obvious reason. Why else are they doing this? Well, do they want to grow the Netflix streaming offering and essentially like subsume Warner Brothers into the Netflix app so that you know, like how Disney have like Discovery, they have like a button for Discovery Plus and stuff like that. Like, will Netflix have a button that says Warner Brothers and you go in and you watch the whole Warner Brothers library from the past? Or are they wanting to keep them kind of separate? They're sort of like a media conglomerate now, and they have multiple arms to that conglomerate. So that would be more like the umbrella company of Google, Alphabet, owning Google, owning YouTube, blah, blah, blah. That's like Meta owning Facebook, owning Instagram, owning WhatsApp, like different entities under the same umbrella. Is it going to be an umbrella above Netflix and Warner Brothers, or is Warner Brothers going to become a part of Netflix? And if it is the latter, if it's going to become a part of Netflix, will the subscription price of Netflix go up? Abso-fucking-lutely. But the real issue here is about Warner Brothers are committed to the cinema experience, and Netflix simply are not. They only release movies in the cinemas for as long as they need to in order to get them eligible for awards, or to get the sort of media rounds done to get enough interest so that when they put it on the streaming service, it helps grow the subscriber base, right? So we're going to review Knives Out 3 later. That's a good example. It's been out in cinemas for 2 weeks before it's going to be released on Netflix this week. But I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I'm going to wait for the Netflix release because the cinema releases from Netflix are not significant. Their footprint is not big enough to consider it really as an actual cinema release. This is a quote from Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos. He says, "There's no reason to believe that the movie itself is better in any size of screen for all people. My son's an editor. He watched Lawrence of Arabia on his phone." That was an interview with the New York Times where Ted Sarandos was arguing that Barbie and Oppenheimer would have been just as big on Netflix. Warner Brothers are the pillar of the 2025 box office. Sinners, One Battle After Another, Weapons, F1 and Superman, you could argue, and Minecraft. I'm going to pull a figure out of my arse and suggest that Warner Brothers contributed, 10%, 20%, maybe 30% of this year's box office. And what happens if you remove that from the industry? Can the industry still survive financially and culturally? This is an industry that's on a knife edge. This is an industry where the margins are pretty small, where the ticket prices of going to see a film, even if you don't believe it, because the ticket prices have inflated a lot, don't actually earn the cinema chains that much money. We all know it's the confectionery, it's the popcorn that costs £8 or whatever. And I don't bemoan that because I understand that I love the cinema experience and the cinemas have got to make money somehow. So imagine, I'm not saying Netflix are definitely going to do this, but imagine if you withdrew Minecraft, Sinners, Weapons and One Battle After Another and Superman and F1 from 2025. How do the profits of those cinemas and cinema chains look? Treacherous, possibly precarious, possibly destructive results, okay? So this is it. This feels apocalyptic to me. This is the violinists on the Titanic at the end of Titanic playing classical and going, "It's been a pleasure." Like this is them. We're waiting for the whole fucking thing to sink here. This is bad. This is Thanos clicking his fingers. Ted Sarandos, the co-CEO of Netflix, is Thanos clicking his fingers, and everything potentially disappears. This is genuinely worrying to me. Not because I think cinemas will not exist entirely and we all just be plugged into streaming at home. Cinemas will always exist to some extent. But you could see the fall of a big chain. You could see a fall of AMC in America. You could see the fall of Cineworld in the UK, which has had a lot of issues. This is just fucking bad. This is the end of Weapons, a Warner Brothers movie where all the kids run after Aunt Gladys and rip her to shreds. And Aunt Gladys is the movies. Fingers crossed. You never know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe the deal falls through. Maybe they do want to get into the cinema. Maybe they do want to support the cinema experience. Maybe they felt they couldn't do that through the Netflix brand and they can through the Warner Brothers brand. Is this like in 2012 when Cineworld purchased Picture House, which was like possibly the most commercial of the cinema chains in the UK, buying the most like art housey cinema chain in the UK, maybe apart from Curzon. And everyone was like, "Oh my god, they're going to turn all the pitch houses into Cineworlds, and they're gonna ruin the ethos of Cineworld." And I thought those things too. And Cineworld came out and said, "No, we're going to protect Pitch House for what Pitch House is. We're trying to diversify. We're not trying to consolidate." And they were of their word. You know, Pitch House has kept their image and ethos. And maybe Netflix are trying to do that. Maybe they're trying to diversify and not consolidate. Okay, we don't know that for sure. But just to say that, I'm currently depressed, and that's not going to change until we hear more. Speaking of Netflix, to finish off, we're going to review Knives Out 3, aka Wake Up Dead Man. So the full title for this is Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out Mystery, which is the most annoying title convention in the world. The first one was called Knives Out, then it was Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, then it's Wake Up Dead Man. First of all, if you want to do the as something mystery, a Knives Out mystery makes no sense, because Knives Out was the equivalent of what Glass Onion and Wake Up Dead Man in. It's like the title of that story, right? It was about that. That's the title of that particular episode, right? It's a Benoit Blanc mystery. The main character played by Daniel Craig. It should be Wake Up Dead Man, a Benoit Blanc mystery, right? That's if you want to do the thing. But it shouldn't even be that. Just call it Wake Up Dead Man. Right. Anyway. So this, like I say, this is the third in the Knives Out franchise, you could say. This is Rian Johnson's original IP franchise. Rian Johnson, who came onto the scene with Brick. He then went on to direct a Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi. And then Knives Out, Glass Onion, Wake Up Dead Man. So Benoit Blanc is the detective in all three. He's played by Daniel Craig, doing a thick Southern American accent. This has a Monsignor, a pastor, played by Josh Brolin. The main character is played by Josh O'Connor, who is essentially like the conduit for the audience in this movie, because like the first one had Ana de Armas as like the audience's eyes. Forgotten what the second one had, and then this one has Josh O'Connor. We've also got an all-star cast. We've got Mila Kunis, Glenn Close, Jeremy Renner. And it's set in sort of like the creaky surroundings of a church community, okay? And that's the first positive about this movie for me, because the second one, if you remember, was this sort of like White Lotus-y scenario where you had a lot of famous rich people go into a remote island, and then a tragic death occurs, and there's a mystery, right? So it was very sort of like sanitized, very sort of clinical visual aesthetic, very kind of like bright and polished and glass and sheen and shine. And that was in direct contrast to the first movie, which was again set in this sort of creaky manor with Christopher Plummer's sort of family and heritage and legacy. And it was all sort of much more classic mystery aesthetic. The second one was a lot different to that, and then this third one is sort of returning to that first movie aesthetic. So it's a bit more creaky, it's a bit darker, it's a bit more gothic. It's a bit more dusty, cobwebs, lamp lights, things like this. And I think that fundamentally suits mystery movies more, and it suits the Knives Out franchise a lot more as well. So kind of for that reason alone, I prefer it to the second movie, because for me, the second movie got lost in that whole like White Lotus culture, where I feel like we had 1,000,001 movies that had the same setup. Rich and or famous people go to a remote location and something bad happens. So this was Glass Onion, The White Lotus, Blink Twice, The Menu, more recently Opus. So many movies went down that path, and I was already sick of it when that movie came out, and also aesthetically it just didn't suit the IP in my opinion. The Knives Out mysteries of film 2 and 3 for me, and there's no spoilers here, they're too convoluted for me to the point of ridiculousness in order to make it entirely unsolvable until you get to the solution. And that gives Benoit Blanc his moment to solve the unsolvable crime, right? That is the whole point of mysteries. And I'm not saying that a mystery should be easy to solve. That would be completely ridiculous. But what I mean is that the solutions to the Knives Out movies are like so not something that you would even consider in the regular discourse of a mystery movie. a mystery movie should at least be potentially solvable by eagle-eyed members of the audience. And although Rian Johnson's doing a great job at implanting and seeding clues along the way in these movies for you to look back on at the end, I don't think it's solvable enough in the moment for it to be a fun journey. Because all that happens is there's just a lot of sort of like smoke and mirrors and a lot of obfuscation of like facts that would lead you to the solution. So then you have no way of finding the solution until Benoit Blanc tells you what the solution is. That to me is a weakness, because then you're on for the ride, and I don't want to know who did it, but I want to feel like I'm with Benoit Blanc every step of the way. He doesn't have enough agency in this movie. He isn't unraveling the mystery in a methodical way enough in this movie. And like I say, neither can the audience really. So it sort of feels static until this giant ending, which I'm not going to spoil, this giant ending, which felt like the ending of Return of the King. It felt like you have a solution, then you have an extension of the solution, then you have an escalation of the solution, then you have the final solution. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, I couldn't have predicted any of that. Well done, because you just pulled it all out your fucking arse. And Benoit Blanc barely got his moment because it went so even above his head. That being said, is the movie enjoyable? Yes. Is the movie funny? Yes. Will fans of Knives Out enjoy this movie? Yes. Right? I think so. I think I'm going to start contextualizing my reviews more as my subjective point of view versus objectively fans of this, what will they think? Right? I think fans of Knives Out will think this is fun. This is a 4-star movie. I think they would think the original Knives Out is potentially even a 5-star movie. Glass Onion, 3.5, 4, and this is a 4, okay? Subjectively for me, this is a 2.5-star movie. And I want to be clear about my star ratings, because I got some shit on my star ratings last week. Put some respect on the 3-star movie, okay? The 3-star movie is a 6 out of 10. It's a recommendation. It's a go, give it a watch. This is going to be worth your time, right? 2.5 stars for me is 5 out of 10. It means like, I enjoy parts of it. I don't love it. I probably won't watch it again. I think there are some flaws that I can't get around, okay? It doesn't mean I fucking hated it. People have this like, people have a right to have a subjective view on what the star rating system means. But I just fundamentally disagree with anything below 4 stars being deemed an insult to a movie. If that's how you see it, then there is no space for nuance, right? A half-star movie this is a crime on my eyeballs and on cinema in general, and anyone who likes this movie is dumb. That's what half-star is. A 5-star movie is, I enjoyed every single second of this. This is a treasured movie and a treasured experience, and I will watch this again and again for the rest of my life, and I think it's a classic. 5-star is that extreme, and half a star is that extreme. And anything in between that is a sliding scale. So I give Wake Up Dead Man 2.5, which doesn't mean I hated it. It just means I had an okay time. I'm not going to watch it again. And there are things that I can't get past that I think are flaws, right? That's just what it is. I admit I'm not the biggest fan of the Knives Out franchise for the reasons that I've stated. But this is definitely, objectively, not as good as the first one. And your mileage on the second one may vary depending on how you get on board with that aesthetic. Fans of the Knives Out franchise will enjoy Wake Up Dead Man. For me, I think there are some problems that we've been through. So that's the episode. It was look, there was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of serious points in this episode, right? I want to pitch something slightly more lighthearted that I'm going to do further down the line. I'm not sure exactly when, maybe in the new year. I found a document in my archives on my hard drives of my top movies in 2008. So I've always listed my favorite movies, right? And I found my top movies in 2008, not of 2008, just a snapshot of these were my favorite movies. And I think there's 100 in there, right? So I'm going to do an episode comparing. I haven't even opened the doc properly enough to look at it. I've opened it enough to know that there are movies there, but then I closed it. I'm going to compare my top movies 2008 versus my top movies now and see if I've retained any. See what movies I'd seen then that have stayed consistently my favorites, or that I didn't like as much and have come up the rankings once I've matured as a film viewer, or gone down the rankings. I want to compare. And in comparing, I want you, if anyone has any movies that they used to hate and now they love, or used to love and now they hate, or movies that they used to love and then they went off because they were trying to be better than their teenage self and then they came back to it and now it's their favorite again. I want to hear about these movies. How do you compare to your teenage or child self in terms of your favorite movies? Have you kept the same ones? Have you got new ones? Have you grown on some? Have you gone off some? Send me in your thoughts. I'm going to be asking for these thoughts over the next couple of episodes, and then I'm going to probably do a segment in an upcoming episode. The next episode is going to be the Avatar special. I'm going to go through my Junket experience with James Cameron. I'm going to review Avatar Fire and Ash, which I've now seen twice and possibly 3 times by the time I record it. It's going to be a big one, right? This is a huge moment for FoF. If you've been listening and if you got to the end of this episode, you care. So I will see you there next week. Thank you very much. At Fred Asquith on Film, TikTok and Instagram. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.